Hey everyone, in this video we're going to take a look at chapter 4 of book 1 from Bello Gallico. And like we said before, this is really covering the Helvetian Campaign, which happens at the beginning. It's the onset of the Gallic Wars, which are about 58 to 50 BCE. So what we've been looking at in the Helvetian Campaign is really, one, we got the geography lesson of all Gaul. And then Caesar started to kind of zoom in more narrowly on the land of the Helvetii. And we got introduced to the character of Orgetorix, and we got a little bit of an update as to what the Helvetii are doing, or at least what Caesar is telling us they're planning to do, and why. Now, we also got introduced to the conspiracy, right? So this is really the kind of meat of why Caesar is telling you he attacked the Helvetii. It's this conspiracy of Orgetorix. So if you look at the land of the Helvetii, where he's basically trying to go is southwest. And in the last couple chapters, we talked about why this would work or what obstacles there were. And we've established that the Helvetii are basically going to go in that western path to loop around the Jura Mountains and go find new lands, right? And Caesar told us this is because they want to conquer everything. So that's where we're going to pick it up right now. But before we dive into chapter 4, I realized in my past video I didn't finish chapter 3, just wasn't paying attention. So let's finish that first, and then we'll dive into chapter 4. So the last part of chapter 3 looks like this. You have hac oratione, adducti inter se fidem, et iusurandum dant, et regno occupato per tres potentissimus ac firmissimos populos totius Galliae sese potiri posse speram. So this is starting with a perfect passive participle. So adducti means having been influenced, okay? And it's talking about the Helvetii. So influenced by what? We need the ablative of means, right? You have hac oratione. So you're saying having been influenced by this speech, right? They give among themselves or between themselves, meaning the Helvetii and this conspiracy forming with Orgetorix, which included the Sequani and the Aedui, right? Remember, we got the characters of Julius and Castius. That's who we're really talking about here. But they gave between themselves a fidem, sort of a pledge of faith, and a usurandum, an oath, right? So this is the conspiracy. They're pledging that they're going to help each other. And regno occupato, with the kingship having been secured, or when the kingdom is secured, right, through the three potentissimos, the tres potentissimos, the most powerful and strongest populos, most powerful and strongest people, right? They sperant, they hope, right? This is your indirect statement because they're hoping something. They're hoping that they themselves, say is just a reduplication, right? You could just make it say, but it's more emphatic. They hoped, or they themselves hoped that they would possess, they are able to possess, rather, potiri is your infinitive, right? They're able to possess totius Galliae, right? All of Gaul. So they're trying to, you can almost say gain possession of all of Gaul is a good way to do this as well. But the idea here is that the conspirators are saying, okay, if we combine all our forces and we bring everything together, we have the strongest people, we have these armies. Remember, Orgetorix had said he would come and help them. They're trying to set up the conspiracy where once they have this, everything will all be theirs, is basically the idea. And we said that this is really Caesar kind of showing what is going on behind closed doors. And he's doing this with indirect statement because it's, you could debate whether or not this is real. This is at least what he's telling you is going on. And again, that last line is just an indirect statement. You have the genitive there, totius Galliae. It's really going with potiri, right? To gain possession of is what's happening here. But again, you would ask the question to Caesar, where's your proof, right? And he doesn't necessarily have it, but he's setting you up that there is about to be a conspiracy here. And again, it's this idea of taking over everything, okay? So now we can move on to chapter 4. That's the last line of chapter 3, but the story picks up, okay? So let's dive into it now. You have ea res, est Helvetiis per indicium enuntiata. So we start with ea res, this thing or this affair, okay? And that's kind of an interesting way to start chapter 4, right? It seems to be referencing back to the conspiracy, right, that we just talked about in chapter 3. So he says, this affair, enuntiata est, it was announced, right? So the est is separated, but it's going together, right? It's passive voice, perfect tense. And it's going with Helvetes. It was announced to the Helvetii through indicium, through evidence, you might say. So in other words, the idea is they were able to kind of suss out this conspiracy because they got some, some evidence of it. Or you might even say like informants, right? It's kind of another way to do per indicium. But they get wind of ea res. Now notice how kind of vague ea res is. What exactly did they hear, or what exactly was announced? Caesar doesn't tell you, but it seems to be implying it's the conspiracy of Orgetorix. Then it has moribus suis, Orgetorigem ex vinculis causam dicere coigera. So from their customs, we might even say according to their customs, right? Coigera, they forced, meaning the Helvetii forced Orgetorix, there's your accusative, Orgetorigem, right? So they forced Orgetorix from chains, ex vinculis. They've thrown him in chains. So the conspiracy apparently was uncovered. They put Orgetorix in chains, and now they forced him to causam dicere. This is an idiom that means to plead his case, literally to say the cause, but to explain himself, right? And again, it's moribus suis, according to their customs, right? According to their laws, you might say. Then you have another PPP. It starts with damnatum poenam sequi or aportebat ut igni cremarator. There we go. Let's get it together, right? Cremarator. So it's saying damnatum poenam. So if you go in this sentence, you really want to start with aportebat, right? It was fitting that. So here you have an indirect statement, okay? So he's saying it was fitting, or was custom, that having been condemned, damnatum, and it's talking about Orgetorix here. So it was fitting that having been condemned, a poenam would follow, right? A poenam sequi, right? A penalty would follow. So it's saying, in other words, if he's convicted or condemned, damnatum, what's going to happen is a penalty is going to follow. Right? And then he tells you what that penalty is, namely, ut igni cremarator, namely that he would be burned, right? It's an indirect command. You have your imperfect subjunctive there, but he would be burned, cremated, literally, igni rather, by fire, right? So he will be burned alive is kind of the penalty. Okay. And again, that's the fitting punishment if they find out that he has been betraying the state. So things have taken a very sharp hairpin turn for Orgetorix, right? He was just, out, he was leading the Helvetii, doing all these great things. And now he's on trial for something, right? Even though it hasn't specifically been said, the wording makes it feel like they uncovered the conspiracy, or at least that's what Caesar wants you to believe. And the wording is interesting, right? They're going to burn him alive. It's a pretty severe punishment. So whatever he was accused of, it's something very severe. Then it continues. You have die constituta, causae dictionis Orgetorix ad judicium omnem suam familiam, ad hominem milia decem undique coigit, et omnes clientes obiratosque suos, quorum magnum numerum habebat, eodem conduxit, per eos ne causam diceret se eripuit. It's a long line, okay, but let's just take it one piece at a time. You have die constituta, right, on the appointed day, on the day having been decided, right, the appointed day, you might say. Orgetorix, right, and sorry, it's the day having been appointed for, you might say, the pleading of the case, right, the day of pleading his case. Again, there's that idiom, causae dictionis, right? So on the day he's supposed to plead his case, Orgetorix, and you have to go a little bit to find what he did. He coigit undique. He collected or gathered from everywhere, right? To the judicium, to the judgment. He brought together omnem suam familiam, all of his household. You could say family. It probably means better like his household. So all his family. And then you have a side note here. His family. Odd here means like up to, is something a lot of commentaries put. You could say around is pretty close. In this case, it means around milia decem, 10,000 of men, literally 10,000 men is the claim here of who he brought, his entire household. That's why family doesn't quite work. It means more like your extended people. It almost has the idea of like a patron-client relationship, which Caesar's going to equate it to in a second. So he collected all these people to come to the judgment, right? And you have omnes clientes, right? All his clients, and abiratosque, right? Abiratos are people indebted to him, right? So suos, his debtors, of whom, quorum, it's genitive plural, of whom he had, habebat, a magnum numerum, a great number. Okay, so what did he do with all these people? You have to go to the next line. Eodem conduxit. He led, or he kind of brought together eodem in the same place. So not only does he bring all his household, right, thousands of people, but he's also bringing conduxit, leading together all his clients and all his debtors, of which he had a great number. Now, what Caesar's hitting at here is interesting. He's equating the Helvetian culture to Roman culture. The patron-client relationship is an interesting one, where a wealthy Roman would have people kind of indebted to him who he would do favors for, and they return the favor in situations like this by giving him support in like trials and things like that. That's what Caesar's equating here to Orgetorix. Okay, so he's kind of Romanizing the Helvetii here. Okay, and he brought them all together. So it seems very serious, right? And what's Orgetorix really doing here? Well, Caesar's kind of making it sound like he's bringing people to break him out, right? It's kind of the idea, and you'll see how this plays out. So you have per eos, so through them, right? You have a negative purpose clause here. The ne kind of sets this off. So the hope is that through them, he might not, ne dicere, he might not plead the case, causam dicere. There's that idiom again. So he might not plead the case, and Eripuit say he snatched, right? He snatched himself away is kind of what's going on here, right? So how do we unpack this? What happened? Well, he brought all these people to the trial, right? That was his whole thing. And with the purpose, right? The purpose that he might not plead his case, he snatched himself away. He ran away. So it comes off as Orgetorix has made this sort of diversion with all these people, and somehow Orgetorix disappears in the trial, right? And Caesar's making him look very guilty with this, like, look what he did. Then it continues. You have cum civitas ab eam rem incitata armis ius suum exequi conaretur multitudinemque hominum ex agris magistratus cogerant Orgetorix mortuus est . Okay, so we have a cum clause here meaning when, temporal. So when the state, having been incited, incitata, on account of this thing, meaning because of him running away, they're incitata, they're all rowdy, right, urged up. They conaretur, they tried, here we have that imperfect subjunctive, they tried to, exequi means like to follow through on, to carry out is a good translation of it. They tried to carry out ius suum, its law. And again, it's incited to arms, the army's there. So the state is really riled up by this. They grab all their weapons and they're trying to carry out their own judgment, their use, right? They want to kill Orgetorix, right? Because clearly he's guilty, he ran away. And you have the magistratus, the magistrates, cogerant, they were collecting a multitudinem, a multitude, right? Multitudinemque hominum, a multitude of men from the fields. So the magistrates, the leaders, are gathering men from the fields. When all this happened, all of a sudden you have Orgetorix mortuus est, Orgetorix died. This seems very shady. He ran away, he seems very clearly guilty of this, and all of a sudden he's dead? Like, what happened here? There's a mystery that Caesar's tapping into. Like, yeah, I don't know. He's dead all of a sudden, right? He died. That's a really odd thing to put here, right? And the implication is, he was guilty in what exactly happened with Orgetorix. And then we finish with this thought. You have neque abes suspicio ut Helvetii arbitrantor quin ipse sibi mortem consciverit. So you're saying, and suspicion was absent, right? It was not absent, rather. So in other words, there was suspicion, right? Suspicion wasn't absent as the Helvetii judged, right? Here, the ut going with indicative, it just means as. So as the Helvetii judged it, it was suspicious his death, right? Then you have that they judged that he himself, ipse, brought, consciverit, right? There's your perfect subjunctive. He brought death, mortem, to himself. This is a way of saying that he killed himself. He committed suicide. And look at how this all plays out, right? He's off doing whatever, his conspiracy. He comes back. He's put on trial for something. Caesar doesn't explicitly say what. Caesar claims that Orgetorix brought all these people to the trial, which makes him seem very guilty, like something's happening. Orgetorix breaks out, and all of a sudden Orgetorix is dead. And Caesar just casually throws out this claim of, the Helvetii say that he committed suicide. It all makes him look very, very guilty. So this is all interesting stuff where Caesar is putting a lot of conjecture, and he's trying to lead you down the path of, look at Orgetorix. Of course he did a conspiracy. Why else would he act this way? Even though we're not entirely sure a conspiracy actually happened, and we don't really know what Orgetorix was on trial for. But Caesar's saying this is it, right? It's all a very persuasive way of showing that Orgetorix is a shady person. So hopefully that translation made sense. Again, you want to read it to yourself or find a classmate, and the more you read and practice, the better off you're going to be. I always tell you that. But as you read, I also think it's important to look at some questions too, or to think about questions. So you want to look at how the trial of Orgetorix comes right after the conspiracy at the end of chapter 3, right? We don't actually know what he's on trial for. Caesar just gives us a race, right? This thing, this affair. It's clever positioning by Caesar because he makes it seem that he's on trial for a conspiracy, even though we don't know that that's the case, right? It's all just, he's on trial. It's interesting. You say he's on trial, and it comes right after this fact that you set up a conspiracy. There's a big gap in what actually happened here. Caesar's trying to convince you of that, I would say. Then, even though we don't know what it was, the punishment is he's going to be burned alive. So it's implying that the charge is something serious. Otherwise, why would the threat be you're about to be burned alive, right? So this is all kind of interesting. He's making it seem like something very, important was on trial here, but we're not entirely sure what. The behavior at the trial, bringing all these people, running away, what's happening here, right? And how does it make Orgetorix look? That's something to think about. He looks very guilty. And of course, Orgetorix's death. All of a sudden, Orgetorix is dead. Nobody's sure why. And Caesar just throws out a casual sort of conspiracy theory of, the Helvetii think he might have committed suicide. Why would you mention this, right? Why not go look up the facts? Well, if you're trying to persuade someone, it's much more persuasive in making Orgetorix look guilty if this is why he ended up dead, right? It's all kind of an interesting way in book 4 where Caesar's bringing all the story of Orgetorix together, and he's saying, look at this person, look at the conspiracy he had. Clearly he was guilty. Now, why would he do this? It's all justification for Caesar taking on the Helvetii later, right? At this point, he's already killed them, right? By the time he's writing this, he's probably already defeated the Helvetii. This is an interesting way of trying to justify what he did and persuade his audience. Look at what Orgetorix was doing. The Helvetii, they're bad people, right? It all ties together in this chapter. So think about it, because there's a lot being said here, but not a lot of it is really factual. And if you really think about it, you'll see a lot of it is kind of hearsay and conjecture, and that's the point. Okay, so just something to think about. If you have any questions at all, this is a shorter chapter. Hopefully it went pretty well for you, but put them in the comments below. There's nothing too crazy here. There's a couple sticky sentences where you're just trying to find where the verb is and piece it all together. But again, your best bet, make sure you have the vocab under control. The grammar, you want to read through the story, read it aloud, right? Don't ever skip that. If you can read it and write down where you're struggling, then you go back, you look all these things up, and the second and third time of reading it, you should be able to do this without needing a dictionary and without having to live in sort of a grammar commentary. Once you hit that point of actually reading it and understanding it, you're in a really good place. And as far as the history and the culture behind it, look all of it up. There's a ton of resources you can find. Don't take my word for it. Look all this up. I'm just trying to guide you into some things that we think about in my class, but you should interpret it however you want, right? Maybe you have something different. Okay, good luck with it. Again, let me know if you need anything, but otherwise keep at it. And hopefully it's getting easier as you go.